Welcome to Chapter Endnotes Book Club. My name is Stacey Goldring. I'm the creator of Chapter Endnotes, and I'm really excited to be here and talk about the play Our Town by Thornton Wilder. I think the best way to start is to go ahead and show you a little bit about how I can connect Our Town to Barbra Streisand. I can connect Our Town to Gertrude Stein. I can connect Our Town to the New York Times. I read an article in the New York Times just this morning, and I'm going to pull that up on the screen. And I thought, obviously, the Times is going to do an article on Our Town because why? Well, obviously, because we're discussing it in book club. So hold on while I pull off this feed and share with you a few things that I found. Really, you don't need to be looking at my entire YouTube page, but I didn't plan that very well, did I? That's okay. All right. So I put it here this morning. All right, here we are. Look at that. Yesterday's Broadway war horses saddled with today's concerns. Yes. Saddled with today's concerns. And they talk about Our Town. See, here's the little stage manager right there. And blah, blah, blah. It just goes on about how they're bringing back these old plays and why they're all new again. But let's just get to the meat of it. Who's starring in it? Well, look, September 17th, Our Town opens for previews, and look who's in it. Now, I have never, ever seen a Big Bang Theory, and I really don't want to hear about it. But I don't want to hear anyone complaining about it. I'll get to it, but I've got other things I need to do. But there's other popular people in it too, like John Boy from the Waltons. His name is Richard Thomas, but he was John Boy in the Waltons. So either on screen or off screen, he has two first names. So I'm never going to really remember this one. So John Boy is in it, and he plays Mr. Webb. So how exciting is that? How relevant? So why would Our Town be coming to Broadway? And why would we select Our Town to read right now? Well, I'm going to tell you. This play's message has the power to heal, and it has the power to remind us of what's really important. And as of this recording, we have something coming up in a few months. We have an election. So things here are getting a little, spicy. People are, we live in a world right now that's so divisive, and I'm right, you're wrong, and everyone seems to have all the answers and no one listens to anyone else. Our Town speaks to the beauty of human connection. And it speaks to the fact that the most important thing is appreciating the here and the now and what we have in common as opposed to what separates us. So I look at Our Town as an elixir, and I look forward to discussing Our Town with you. I'll give you a brief look at the structure of the play, some powerful quotes from the play. I'll go ahead and tie it into those interesting things if I can remember even what I said from the beginning with Gertrude Stein, Barbra Streisand, etc. We can also connect it to The Simpsons. And when I say that, you should automatically already know why it's related to The Simpsons, but we'll get to it. And a few other things. I think it's really important to understand the themes of the play and why it is so gripping. It just grabs you at the throat right from the very first page. And if you want to learn more about Our Town and really get into the nitty gritty of like an hour and a half discussion of Our Town, you can join Chapter Endnotes. The link is below, and have access to the replay library, or even join us live when we have our live discussions. And I would love to have you. All right. So I'm going to summarize the play for you in case you, like me, had never read it, had never seen it. And a little bit, I kind of molded it together with Spoon River Anthology. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But anyway, it is a play that takes place over the course of a day in Grover's Corners, New Hampshire. It's a fictional place. And it shows the story of two families and what happens during the day, the end. So that's it. And that may sound incredibly boring, It's incredibly powerful. And the Pulitzer Committee thought it was too, and awarded the play the second of 3 Pulitzers that Thornton Wilder would receive in his life. So the first was for The Bridge Over San Luis Rey. That is a novel that he wrote about 10 years prior. And if you haven't read that, I also recommend you pick up that novel as well. Okay. Very quickly, I want to go over some powerful quotes about the play. These are quotes that are kind of rise to the surface, so I want to share them with you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. And that comes from our main character, Emily, who in Act 3 is looking back on life and asking our stage manager, our narrator, that question. The next, this is spoken by Mrs. Gibbs in Act 2, and she says, people are meant to go through life 2 by 2. Tain't natural to be lonesome, unquote. And this speaks to the idea of how important it is to have human connection. You may think that this play, if you've heard of it, maybe you also heard that it was religious. I could find nothing super duper uber religious in this play. However, there is one point where our stage manager steps into the role of minister. So that could maybe be, have a connotation. Yeah, I totally understand that. But he says something for you to consider. Quote, we all know that something is eternal. It ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't earth, and it ain't even the stars. But everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal. And that something has to do with human beings, unquote. So this speaks to that magic spark in all of us, the soul, the space dust, whatever you want to call it in between. This play takes on and tackles really big themes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and give you a brief summary. Well, for me, brief. I'll go ahead and give you a summary of our town. We first see Dr. Gibbs, Mrs. Gibbs, Rebecca, George, Wally, and Emily Webb, and Mrs. Webb. So we see 2 families. The stage manager sets the scene. Come back to that in a minute. But he sets the scene, and it's early one morning in 1901, and Dr. Gibbs returns home to Grover's Corner in New Hampshire. He had just been across the tracks in Polish Town delivering twins. So it is daybreak, and we have the arrival of twins. Okay. And we see the morning paper boy, Joe Crowell, come by, and Howie Newsom, the milkman, and the day is beginning in Grover's Corners. His wife, Mrs. Gibbs, has breakfast ready for him. Rebecca comes down to the table to eat. George and Rebecca come down to the table to eat. George will end up being one of our main characters. Rebecca's his little sister. After they eat, they leave for school. We see the same thing happening on the other side of the stage, where we have the Webb family, and we see Wally and Emily, who will be the main character, who also come down, get ready, eat breakfast, and go to school. Normal day. The children leave. Mrs. Gibbs comes outside, starts to feed her chickens. Mrs. Webb is stringing beans in her backyard. This is not something to yawn about. This is all incredibly important. Stay with me. They have a discussion about making money decisions. George and Emily meet as the day passes. George is on his way to play baseball, and he stops to talk to Emily, and he tells her how much he admires her. We recognize that this is the beginning of courting. The evening comes and Mrs. Webb and Mrs. Gibbs are at choir practice. We have George and Emily upstairs studying. You can picture this all happening. Their windows face each other. George calls out to Emily to kind of help him with some type of math problem. Then we switch to choir practice and we have Mrs. Webb, Mrs. Gibbs, Mrs. Webb, and we have Simon Stimson, who is the choir leader, and he also is known as the town drunk, the alcoholic. He plays an incredibly important role in this play when it comes to where we are in American society at the time this play is written. He's incredibly important. He's the only really sad figure in the play. Most of the characters in the play, all 28, seem to be happy, seem to be content. After choir practice, the ladies talk a little bit and they comment on Simon. Some think he's worse off, some think he's better off, but none of them offered to help. We meet Mr. Webb again. He goes home. He's the editor of the local paper. He goes home and he sees Simon roaming the streets. When he gets home, he finds that Emily is still looking out of her window and daydreaming, looking up at the stars. We then fast forward to George and Emily. It's their junior year of school, and George has been just elected president. And Emily, well, she is the secretary, but she's not happy with George anymore. He's kind of become the big man on campus, and she's not really impressed, and she tells him so, and he's kind of upset about it. She's upset about it because she didn't want to hurt his feelings. They end up at an ice cream parlor together, talking about the future. Very quickly, they see that they have a future for one another. It's a shock to the parents that George wants to marry Emily instead of going off to college. They can't imagine that George is anything, but a kid. He's a child. They look back on their own married lives as I'm looking at a squirrel on my bird feeder. Hold on. I don't think so, Buster. All right, so this is going to be a recurring theme in today's presentation, and that is a squirrel on my bird feeder. Okay. Going on. So they look back on their marriage. They've been married for quite a long time now. They have a very different idea about love. Love is a theme in the play. We see that George leaves the house for school. The next scene we have is the morning of the wedding. So now we're fast forwarding. We're still in Grover's Corners. We see George, the morning of the wedding, George drops in on Mr. and Mrs. Webb, and Mrs. Webb is not happy that he's come because there's a tradition where the groom is not supposed to see the bride on the day of the wedding. So Mrs. Gibb kind of, I think the word is intimates that Webb should maybe have a talk with Mr. Webb. George should talk to Mr. Webb and maybe, set him straight about marrying their daughter, maybe give some advice about married life. And he does give some advice, and it's rather funny. The next scene, we are at the church just before the ceremony. Both Emily and George feel they're making a dreadful mistake. We even hear Mrs. Webb turn to the audience and say that this whole thing is cruel. This whole thing about marriage is cruel. So it's very interesting. We also have our stage manager who also breaking the fourth wall. This happens all throughout the play. Explained that he feels that, marriage, he's not impressed. He doesn't think too much of it. The wedding ceremony is, also, I forgot to tell you that Emily is incredibly nervous about getting married, and she kind of has a panic attack and says to her father, let's run away. I just want to be your little girl. So it takes this whole idea where if you think back, I'm sure there's a time in your life where you remember when you were very young that all of a sudden there's a big bad world out there. And frankly, you don't want any part of it. And you just want to remain a little kid. And Thornton Wilder captures that beautifully right before Emily walks down the aisle. The next scene is 9 years later. I believe we're at the beginning of Act 2. We are now at Act 3, and we are 9 years later. And where are we? We are in a graveyard. spoiler alert for the few people out there besides me who did not know what happens in the play, particularly at the end. And it appears that Emily has died of childbirth. It's the summer of 1913. There's a new grave we see people sitting in rows, and we see Emily walk in, and we recognize that Emily has passed, and she's supposed to take her seat in the cemetery. She's left George alone with their 4-year-old son. So on the other side of the stage, we know it is raining, and there's a funeral procession that's coming up to a new grave, and that's where it opens. The stage manager, who is with us and the narrator throughout this entire story, Emily pleads with him that she wants to go back. She doesn't want to die. The other people in the graveyard, including Mrs. Gibbs, including her brother Wally, who we discovered dies as a kid. He was on a Boy Scout camping trip, and his appendix burst. He's in the you, my friend. Excuse me, this cannot go on. Go away. Oh my goodness. So I don't mean to laugh because Wally, his appendix burst. Anyway, also in the graveyard is Simon Stimson. We find out that he took his own life, which is very sad. Emily wants to go back in time. So we just had the last act where she didn't want to grow up. And we have the final act where she wants to go back in time. The other people in the graveyard urge her not to. And if she is going to go back, the departed tell her, pick a day that is not special to you, not hugely momentous. So she picks her 12th birthday. And she goes back, and she even asks the stage manager, our narrator, how long can I be there for? And he says, you can be there the whole day. So again, like the opening of the play, which is at dawn, she chooses dawn of that day. And what happens in this play within a play, as Emily walks into her home, she stands in the kitchen and she sees her mother come down for breakfast. She sees her preparing everything and screaming upstairs, Emily, Wally, come down. You need to eat. And Emily answers her back, even though she's standing right there. The play is written so well that we, the reader, the audience member, we have no problem understanding exactly what is happening here, that Emily is at once back in time at her 12th birthday, and further, she's back in time because we know she has already passed. And there she is calling, okay, Mom, I'll be right down. It is absolutely chilling. Then it's as if Emily is not there, even though she's standing in the kitchen. We see her mother say to her father when she walks in, did you get something for Emily? He's like, yes, I have it right here. I got something for Emily. Emily appears downstairs, and her mother says something about, your brother made you something at school. It's not so great, but just, tell him that you like it. And she just says to her mother, I wish you could just see me. Do you see me here? Can you appreciate how beautiful, I'm paraphrasing here, how beautiful this moment here is in time? Can we just embrace each other? Can we appreciate? But her mother's just going about the preparations like it's another day. And she turns to he's almost like a Christmas Carol. He's almost like a Ghost of Christmas Past type of thing. And she says, can any human being, as I said at the beginning, can anyone appreciate the beauty of the present? And the stage manager tells her, no, not really. Maybe so often a poet gets a whiff of it, or, a philosopher, but really the living cannot appreciate it. Emily then says, I can't go on with this day. She comes back through whatever it is, that partition she has to pass through, that Bardo, through the wall, through the river Styx, whatever. She comes back and she takes her place in the cemetery next to Mrs. Gibbs, her mother-in-law. She even lets her mother-in-law know. She goes, you know what? With your legacy, with the money you left us, we bought a Model T, which is a cue to us, the audience, reading now, when I'm reading this in 2004, or even when the play came out, which was back in 1938, that cars are becoming a thing. We're moving away from the rural into, we're all leaving the horse and carriage, and we're moving on to the automobile. And she says they even got a copyright for this. They have this new pump that they're using. And, so the idea that technology is on the rise. And she says all this to her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law is like, she is so moved on. She is so not with the living. I'm sure there's some great German literary term for this. I wish I had one for go away squirrel. Again, we pause, click, go away. See, I put peanuts in the bird feeder because I want to attract the chickadees that love it and the blue jays that love it, and particularly the titmouses who love it. The cardinals could care less. But obviously the squirrels love it. So this is my constant, I'm Sisyphus over here with the squirrels. Anyway, maybe that should be the subtitle of this, Sisyphus and the Squirrels. Anyway, seriously, Emily now has truly made the transition, leaving that wanting, that longing that we all feel when we want to go back in time, or that urge that we all feel to be with someone we love just one more time, what we wouldn't give for that, right? We look for signs like, oh, there's a butterfly, that's blah, 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 or I saw an owl, or, people pay hundreds, thousands of dollars for someone to tell them, oh, yes, I saw your so-and-so, you're fine, or they had a blue whatever. I mean, people so want to connect with those no longer living. And in this case, Thornton Wilder has just flipped it. Those, who want to go back and be with the living. And Emily takes her place, not only physically, but mentally, with those who really pity the living because they cannot appreciate the beauty in the everyday, right? The beauty in human interaction. And in the final moments of our play, we see George come to her grave and absolutely sob. And Emily, like Mrs. Gibbs, like Simon Stimson, like Wally, like everyone else, she sees him, but that emotional, the mortal pull of emotion has left. Emily is in another dimension. She's in another space, further hitting home the power of our town to tell us that perhaps it is a fruitless endeavor to try as we go through life to always, always appreciate the present. But we can certainly try. We can certainly try. All right, now, I've explained as best I wish you could see that. If I could turn my desktop so you could see the squirrel, you would be amazed. Okay. I don't know why this is happening now. All morning, no squirrel. Now, squirrel. Okay. This entire play has been performed with no curtain, no props, no scenery, nothing. It's people on a stage. So what I want to do now is I'm going to play for you a few of the more popular productions of our town that I have found online. And just to give you an idea of different stage managers, and we're going to see Hal Holbrook. We're going to see Spalding Gray, and we're going to see Paul Newman in different productions of Our Town, so you can get an idea for the lack of anything on the stage. And then we're going to talk about why the lack of anything makes it even more powerful. Here we go. So I've showed this to you. This is the ad for Our Town that's going to be on Broadway. Here we are with the opening of Our Town with Hal Holbrook. Here we go.
Our Town by Thornton Wilder, a drama that has been performed more than any other play in the history of the...
She was in, I don't know, I hope you can see this. Let me make sure. Stand by, stop, share. She was the mom in Dallas. I don't know her name, but I remember that lady.
The American Theater, starring in alphabetical order, Ned Beatty, Barbara Bel Geddes, Robbie Benson, Ronnie Cox, Glynis O'Connor, Sada Thompson, and Hal Holbrook as the stage manager.
This play is called Our Town. It is written by Thornton Wilder. The name of the town is Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, just across the Massachusetts line. Latitude 42 degrees 40 minutes, longitude 70 degrees 37 minutes. Well, I better show you how our town lies. Up here is Main Street. Cutting across it over there on the left is the railroad tracks across.
So that's one version of a famous version of Our Town with Hal Holbrook. And I just want to give a shout out to Peter Krutzer, because that's where he posted this on YouTube, and I just want to thank him. And now I'm going to go ahead and show you the next Our Town, which is 1989. Remember Great Performances on PBS? Well, this is from Great Performances, and it looks like Michael Holleran went ahead and posted this. So thank you very much, Michael. And here we go. Oh, this is with Spalding Gray, the amazing Spalding Gray. Forgive the hissing.
This play is called Our Town. It's written by Thornton Wilder. The name of the town is Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, just across the Massachusetts line. Latitude 42 degrees 40 minutes, longitude 70 degrees 37 minutes. The first act shows a day in our town. The day is May 7th, 1901. The time is just before dawn.
Just before dawn. I reiterate this because one of the themes in this play is the cycle of life, of birth and death. Birth and death. All right, so now we're going to go to 2003. And this play, the Joanne Woodward production, I read was created in response to 9/11. So an idea using art, this play, I think, this is my interpretation, as a way to remind us what is important, to remind us with what binds us. In a way, it's a very American play, yet so universal. In fact, this play is performed every day, somewhere across the world, every day somewhere. So here we go. And again, we're going to start with the stage manager.
This play is called Our Town. It was written by Thornton Wilder and is being produced here by the Westport Country Playhouse. Name of the town, Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, just over the line from Massachusetts. Latitude 42 degrees 40 minutes, longitude 70 degrees 37 minutes. First act shows a day in our town. Day is May 7th, 1901. Just about dawn. Yep, just about. Sky's beginning to show some streaks of light in the east there, behind our mountain.
So now you have just a few examples of how our town has been portrayed in different famous productions of it. I think now where I will take you I will explain to you how our town can be connected to some of the names that I mentioned when we started the video. It just so happens that Gertrude Stein and Thornton Wilder were friends. Not only that, he was also friends with F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zelda Fitzgerald, and Ernest Hemingway. It's amazing how these like minds, these talented people all cross one another's paths. And I was joking with a friend of mine and I said, I bet if I dug a little further, I'd even find out he was friendly with Vita Sackville West and Sherwood Anderson, because all these people are like the Kevin Bacon of the literary world. Not that Kevin Bacon isn't also literary, mind you. All right. So Thornton Wilder also wrote The Matchmaker. The Matchmaker eventually became Hello, Dolly, starring Carol Channing and Barbra Streisand. So that's another connection. Another fun connection is The Simpsons. Our town is directly related to The Simpsons. The Simpsons mention our town. And also, if you think about our town, is situated, in The Simpsons case, in Springfield, the quintessential normal, average American town. So there is your connection there. There are a lot of famous authors who have been influenced by Thornton Wilder and our town, and one of them happens to be Stephen King. Another playwright is Edward Albee and David Mamet. Thornton Wilder also wrote The Bridge, the Bridge of San Luis Rey. And this book, which he wrote after he graduated from Princeton with his MA in French literature, he wrote this book in 1926, I believe. And in 1927, he won a Pulitzer. So we can correct Bridge over San Luis Rey, which is about a disaster. It's about these people who fell off of this bridge, and we learn about each of these characters. We can tie this directly to movies that you may have seen, such as the Titanic or the Poseidon Adventure, because this book is connected with the genre of disaster fiction. So that's kind of a fun thing, and it could very well be some type of question that is asked on a Final Jeopardy question. I want to come back to our character. Like I said, there's 28 characters in the play. We have 2 families, and then we have all these other townspeople. But I want to direct your attention to a minor character, but an important character, because he gives us a clue and unlocks the key to the context in which this play was written. And that is the character of Simon Stimson. Simon Stimson, I would describe as an Eeyore type of personality. He is always sad. He's seen wandering around. And unfortunately, Simon Stimson is an alcoholic. He is the town drunk. The comments that the characters make about Simon Stimson is Thornton Wilder's commentary on how we treat one another in America at the time. We hear comments about Simon Stimson. They only happen very briefly. We have the constable talk about him, and we have Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Soames and Mrs. Weber talk about him after a choir practice, because he is also the choir director. And they reference that he's the town drunk. So cruel, but that's what they. Well, it appears that the Zoom connection went awry, and so we're blaming the squirrel. This is a squirrel issue, and it is ongoing. And maybe it is my cue to wrap this up. So let me just finish what I was telling you about Simon Stimson, and then we'll call it a wrap. And I invite you to spend the afternoon checking out the links below. You can go ahead and screen our town. There's several great links available on YouTube, and it's a great way to be reminded of what's important. But Simon Stimson is kind of stands as the bellwether for what was happening to those who needed a hand up in our country at the time. See, this play was written and depicts the progressive movement. This was a time when we were reacting to the robber barons, the Vanderbilts and the Morgans and the Fricks and all these people who were living the high life. And, if you've ever read anything by Edith Wharton, you're keenly aware of this in a lot of her books. But, it talks about the different classes. Well, I don't want to go into that. But we're at the beginning of where people are looking around and saying, you know what, there's a lot of have and have nots. And we want people to, have a safety net, have rights, be able to help one another. There was no income tax, etc. So along come these progressives, and they want justice. I don't know if you're familiar with Jacob Riis, or it might be Rice. He's the photographer who took those incredible pictures of what was happening in the tenement houses at the time. There's a lot, the coal mine strikes, etc. Did I mention the Rockefellers? Throw in the Rockefellers too. But anyway, so you have the beginnings of unions, etc. All that to say, I want to take you back to the beginning of the play. So very cyclical. We will end where we began, or we will begin to end where we began. Our stage manager, who, like I said, breaks the fourth wall and comes out and speaks to us. He is like the Greek chorus. He's like our narrator. He wants to give us some background on Grover's Corners. And so he brings out first a professor who knows a lot about the history of the town, and then he brings out the publisher, Mr. Webb of the local newspaper. And the newspaper man, he gives the stats of the town, how many Protestants, how many Catholics, how many this, how many that. And then the stage manager says, can we take some questions from the audience? Again, very avant-garde for the time. When this play came out, it was incredibly avant-garde. It was as if you walked into a museum, you expected to see a Rembrandt, but what you ended up seeing was a Picasso or a Salvador Dali. It was absolutely shocking. And one of those reasons is we have audience members that are actors in the play. And the stage manager and the newspaper man take questions from the audience. And one of those questions is from a character we only hear from once in the play. And his name, the name of the character is the belligerent man. To Simon Stimson, what about taking care of one another? This is incredibly powerful. And we find out in the third act that Simon Stimson has taken his life. So this is there was no NAMI, there was no AA meetings, there were no social services. You may have had, certain charities if you would have gone to ask for help, but really there was nothing in place for us as a society to take care of one another. And that's something that Thornton Wilder is documenting and projecting in his play. So I will wrap it up by saying we're dealing with a play that has certain elements to it that are absolutely both classical and groundbreaking for its time. We're dealing with meta theater. There are no scenes. There are no props. There's no. Our actors are miming. There's no kitchen per se. There's just a table and some chairs. Because Thornton Wilder felt something was lacking in theater. There was so much potential, but it was being all schlocked up with dramatic scenery and singing and props and costumes. And he wanted to break away everything to reveal the beauty and the human connection that we all share and the beauty of life itself. So by stripping the experience of any of the traditional trappings, we are able to see a normal day from sun up to sundown with all the heartache, with all the happiness, with all the mundane. We have the newspaper man and the milkman and them making it breakfast, etc. But he is able to see and show us the absolute beauty in life. I hope that you will go ahead and read Our Town. I appreciate you visiting me today at Chapter Endnotes Corners, as well as Grover's Corners. I also appreciate you allowing me to defend my bird feeder filled with peanuts, and that the idea that something went wrong earlier, tech speaking, as we like to say, it will all be fixed in post, thank goodness. So next month, we will be reading The Island of Missing Trees. And if you are a member of Chapter Endnotes, and you can go ahead and join, the link is below, you can have access to our replay library where we have tons and tons of videos reviewing amazing books. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.